Hi there, freelance friends. Welcome back. Welcome to the Freelance Shift. My name's Jennifer, and I am here to help freelancers simplify their workflow so that they can work less and earn more. Now, this is an interesting topic today. It's a realization that I had after I had a conversation with my sister over the weekend. We were at a family party, and the conversation really made me step back and think about the freelance life that I've built and how fundamentally different it is from traditional employment. I, of course, knew this, but this conversation really enlightened me and brought up some things that I thought would be worthwhile sharing with you. So my sister just started a new full-time job. Now she's in her 40s, and we were talking about her new job and whether or not she liked it and all of the details about the new job. And she really said something that stuck with me. And it was that she was hoping to stay with this new company that she just started with until her retirement. She basically said that she didn't want to interview anymore, and she didn't want to have to worry about onboarding at a new place ever again. And of course, I did understand where she was coming from, and I could tell that the relief in her voice was real. She's happy that she finally found something that seems like it's going to be stable for the long term. So she's ready to settle in for the long haul. But as she was talking, I also realized that my professional life is the exact opposite of what she mentioned. I am always interviewing for new gigs. It's a constant cycle of discussing new gigs and seeing if I'm the right fit for it with a variety of people. And because I often work with several companies at the same time, all the time, I'm constantly onboarding somewhere new. So for me, the idea of staying in one place until retirement isn't just unfamiliar to me. It's not even part of how I think about work anymore. So the conversation with my sister really did get me thinking about the real trade-offs of freelancing. Not the romanticized version that you see everyone discussing on social media, and not the doom and gloom warnings from people who've never done it, who think that it's just not possible to maintain a consistent workflow and income doing freelancing. I can tell you that for me, it has been. So I'm just hoping to give a glimpse into the honest reality of what you gain with freelancing and what you give up with freelancing to help you inevitably decide which path to choose if there is something that you're considering. So from my vantage point, the pros of freelancing is that you get to work with a variety of companies. I know this may seem like a drawback to some of you, but I feel like this really teaches you a lot. And for me, it may actually be the biggest benefit, because in traditional employment, you really can see how one company operates. You learn their systems, their culture, their way of doing things. And of course that has value, but it's also somewhat limiting. So me, in my role as a freelancer, I get to see inside multiple organizations. I work with a healthcare company, I work with a tech startup, I work with a large corporation and a small consulting firm, sometimes all in the same month. So I really have the ability to see how different industries approach the same problem. I learn what works and what doesn't across many different contexts. And in my opinion, that exposure makes me better at what I do. I can say to a client, I've seen another company handle this challenge by doing X, and it worked really well. Would that approach make sense here? And I don't feel like I was able to gain that same perspective when I was working a full-time job. Second, you can work for multiple companies without anyone complaining. Now, obviously, in a traditional job, if you want to take on a side project or work for another company, you sometimes need permission. And of course, there are instances where it's outright forbidden in your employment contract. But as a freelancer, working for multiple clients simultaneously is just a given. It's just how it works. Nobody expects exclusivity unless you're on a specific retainer that stipulates otherwise. So I can teach training for one company in the morning, consult with another in the afternoon, and then work on course development for a third in the evening. And that is very common in what I do. And for me, this variety keeps things interesting and also diversifies my income so that if one client slows down or ends a contract early, I'm not left with nothing. Another benefit is that you can refuse projects that don't interest you or align with your goals. I feel like this is huge. And this is probably the biggest thing that's, at least so far, kept me from going back to a full-time role. Because in a traditional job, when your boss assigns you a project, you must do it, even if it's boring, even if it's something that you really don't enjoy, doesn't align with your career goals, even if you think it's a waste of time. Now, as a freelancer, I do have that option to say no. If a potential client reaches out about a project that doesn't interest me or doesn't fit my skill set the way that I feel like it should, or if it just feels like an overall bad fit, I can decline the project. Of course, I have to do this politely and professionally, but inevitably I can decline. That doesn't mean that I say no to every project that I don't love. It's life. We have to be realistic. Sometimes you take projects for the income or to build your relationship or to learn something new. But you have the option to say no when you're a freelancer, and that autonomy is powerful. The next benefit of freelancing is you have flexibility over your hours. Now, let me be clear. This doesn't mean I work whenever I feel like it. I know that some freelancers have managed to do that. I have not managed to do that yet. Now, it's because I have deadlines, I have client meetings, I have commitments, and I work with companies who align to a traditional workday schedule for the most part. But even with that, I'm not stuck to the strict 9-to-5 schedule that someone else sent for me. If I do need to take a morning off for a doctor's appointment, I can work later that evening. If I'm more productive in the early morning, I could structure my day around that. If I want to take a long lunch break to go for a walk, I can, as long as I'm meeting my deadlines and commitments that I've scheduled throughout the day. So this flexibility is obviously especially valuable for managing my life outside of work. I don't have to ask permission to attend one of my children's school events or deal with a home repair. I can just adjust my schedule. Additionally, I can take time off when I want, for the most part. And this is related to that flexibility point, but I feel like it is worth calling out separately. I don't have to put in a vacation day request in advance and hope that it gets approved. I don't have to worry about using up my allotted PTO time. If I want to take time off, I can let my clients know in advance and plan around that and take the time off. Now, of course, the trade-off is I'm not getting paid for that time off, but the autonomy to decide when I step away is something that I value a lot. And then the last thing that I'll mention that's a benefit is that you can build really long-term client relationships that work for you. And this is something that I didn't necessarily know when I started on this path. Some client relationships can last for years, and I've been lucky enough to have ongoing clients who I've worked with for years at this point. They aren't just one-off projects, they're sustained relationships where I continue to provide value and they continue to compensate me for it. So this is really the best of both worlds because I have the stability of ongoing income from these clients that I know and I trust, but I also have the freedom to take on other work and shape my business the way that I want. So pending any unforeseen circumstances, I'm likely to be able to continue some of these relationships for years to come. I've already had many of them for years, and that does give you a sense almost of job security, but without giving up the autonomy of freelancing. Now, I don't want to paint a one-sided picture in this case. There are definitely cons of freelancing, and sometimes nobody talks about those, or at least in my opinion, they don't talk about those enough. And I think that for you to make a well-informed decision, if this is something that you want to do long-term, you should really be aware of them. So let's talk about the hard parts, because there are real trade-offs, and anyone considering freelancing should understand what they're signing up for. The first one is that you're constantly interviewing for roles. So go back to the conversation with my sister. This is what she said she never wants to do again. And it's something that I do all the time. And if you're in the freelance business, every new client is essentially a job interview. So you do have to make that pitch and present your credentials. You have to explain why you're the right fit for this project. And then, of course, just like when you are interviewing for a new job, you have to negotiate terms. You have to prove yourself. And even with my ongoing clients, you're still interviewing in a sense, because every time a new project comes up in their pipeline or a new direction is suggested, you have to sell your value. Now, some people, like me, I guess, thrive on this. I think I've just gotten used to it. But for other people, it can be completely exhausting in a way that traditional employment isn't. Because when you have a job, you interview once essentially, and then you're in. As a freelancer, you're never really in. You're always proving yourself. Now, the second drawback is that you don't have any paid vacation or sick time. So remember when I said I can take time off whenever I want? That is true. But I'm not getting paid for it. So I have to really plan carefully. If I take a week off, that's a week of income I'm not earning. And if I get sick and I can't work for 3 days, I'm not getting paid for those 3 days. There's no safety net. There's no accrued PTO. There's no, I'll take a sick day and still get my salary. And you really do have to plan for this. You have to build it into your rates, and you have to save enough to cover the times when you're not working. It's one of the biggest mental shifts from traditional employment. Time off is a cost, not a benefit. Now, the other drawback is that nobody is contributing to your retirement. In a traditional job, many employers offer a 401k match. In fact, it's one of the conversations that I was having with my sister. She was very pleased because the new company that she received a job with was offering a higher 401k match than her previous company. Now, in this case, the company contributes money towards her retirement just for participating in the plan and contributing herself. It's basically like free money or an additional perk that you get. But as a freelancer, there is no employer match. There is no automatic retirement contribution. If you want to save for retirement, you have to do it yourself. And you really have to be disciplined about it. I know that that is a personal struggle for me. When it was directly taken from my paycheck, it was something that was much easier than now when I'm paid on a 1099 and I have to take that money and allot it to different buckets. Now, in my case, I do have both an IRA and a SEP IRA that I contribute to, but again, it requires active planning and decision making. Nobody's doing it for me. And in months where cash flow is tight, it is tempting to skip the contribution, even though you know that you shouldn't. Another con is that you don't have set hours, which, yes, that is a plus, right? Because didn't I say flexibility? That's a pro. Yeah, but there is a flip side, because when you don't have set hours, it's easy to work all the time. There's no clear boundary between your work time and your personal time, especially when you do a lot of your work remotely and your office is right there, right off of your hallway in my case. So you really do have to create that boundary, because when you're a freelancer, there's always more work you could be doing. Another client you could reach out to, another proposal you could write, another skill you could learn. So the flexibility to work whenever you want can turn into the pressure to work all of the time. And I have been told that I do work all of the time. I don't think I actually work all of the time, but I do probably need to find a better balance myself and be intentional about creating more boundaries, because otherwise the work will just consume everything. Now, another drawback is that you can be viewed as an outsider at the organization that you work with when you are a freelancer. This one is subtle, but I'm going to admit it's real. When you're a freelancer working with a company, you're not really part of the team in the same way that the employees are. You're not invited to company events. You're not included in internal communications. You're not part of the long-term planning conversations. You're an outsider. You're the contractor, basically viewed as temporary help. And sometimes that's fine. Sometimes it's even preferable, because you don't have to deal with those office politics or mandatory meetings that you don't relate to. But other times it's very isolating. You are doing meaningful work. You're making contributions that add real value, but you're still not fully part of the organization. And then, of course, when layoffs or budget cuts happen, freelancers are often the first to go. We're easier to cut because there's no severance, no unemployment benefits, no legal complications. They can just cut us without any notice. Now, a couple other drawbacks are that your income can be unpredictable, especially if you don't have any consistent clientele. But even when you do, even with ongoing clients, freelance income isn't always steady. A client may pause a project unexpectedly. A contract might end sooner than planned. An invoice may get paid late. A month that looked financially solid on paper can suddenly become tight. I know that one of the projects that I'm on consistently did slow down for a little portion last year, and it is disruptive. You really have to be good at managing cash flow, and you have to be sure to save for lean months in advance. So I don't think freelancing is for someone who isn't comfortable with at least a small level of financial uncertainty that isn't there in traditional employment, because you're going to get your check every 2 weeks or whatever the cadence is in that situation. Now, some freelancers love the variability. It keeps us motivated to hustle. Others find it stressful, and it's a real consideration. And then the last one is that when you're a freelancer, you handle everything yourself. You're not just doing the core work that the client hires you for. You're also doing, in most cases, your own accounting, your own marketing, your own HR, your own IT support. Now, I have an accountant, but I am responsible for getting all of that information to my accountant. And that is definitely real work. So it is just something to think about, that you have a lot of hats to wear, and not all of them are hats that you always want to wear, but they're part of the freelance deal. So what's better? I don't know if there's a definitive answer. I don't think that either path is objectively better. It depends on the situation and the individual. In the case of my sister, she found a job she's excited about, and she's relieved to have that stability and stop interviewing. That's genuinely great for her. I'm happy that she found that. She knows what she values, and she's made a choice that aligns with those values. But then on my end, I've built a freelance career that gives me things that I really value: variety, autonomy, flexibility. And that's been great for me. And I know that the choices that I've made align with me and those values. So essentially, I think that if you're someone who values stability and predictability, benefits like health insurance, retirement contributions, paid time off, being part of a team long term, having very clear boundaries between your work and your personal life, and also not having to constantly sell yourself, then traditional employment is probably for you. On the other hand, if you're someone who really values autonomy, control over your work, variety, and exposure to different industries, a little bit of flexibility in your schedule, the ability to say no to work that doesn't fit, the ability to build something that's entirely yours, then freelancing is probably for you. But neither path is perfect. Neither path is necessarily easy. They both obviously have their trade-offs. What freelancing has taught me about me is that right now I'm not built for the stay until retirement model. The idea of being in one company doing similar work for a while still sounds suffocating to me at this stage of my life. I really do like the variety. I like working with multiple clients. I like the challenge of constantly proving myself and evolving. But with that said, I do also recognize that I'm trading security for autonomy. I'm trading benefits for flexibility. I'm trading stability for variety. In most days, I'm okay with that trade, but I'll admit that there are days, especially when a project falls through, or when I'm doing my taxes, or when I'm dealing with a difficult client, where I think, man, a steady paycheck and an employee-sponsored health insurance plan really sound nice right now. And those moments are real. They're part of the freelance experience. So I'm not saying that this is a forever thing. I think that it is. For now, I'm happy with the freelance model. I do generally enjoy the variety. However, I'm also realistic enough to know that what works for me now may or may not work forever. Maybe in 5 years, I'll crave more stability. Maybe in 10 years, I'll get tired of the constant hustle and want the security of an employer-sponsored benefit plan and predictable paycheck. And if this happens, it's okay. There's no rule that says once you choose freelancing or once you choose a full-time job, you're stuck with it forever. Life changes. Our priorities shift as we go through different stages in life. So what we need right now may be different from what we need later. While my sister's thrilled to have found the stability she was looking for, I'm thrilled to currently have the autonomy and variety that freelancing gives me. So we're both making choices that fit who we are and what we need right now. And right now is that key phrase. Because the beauty of work is that it doesn't have to be permanent. It doesn't have to be an unchangeable decision. You can build either a freelance or a full-time career and then decide that you want to change the structure later on. So for me, right now, my choice is freelancing with all its chaos, uncertainty, variety, freedom, and possibility. But who knows? It may change someday. It may change for you someday, and we should be okay with that. I hope this was helpful to you. Please like and subscribe. It really does benefit the channel, and let other people know that we're here talking about these topics. I'd appreciate it. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.